back to another episode of the Decision Hour. I'm your host, Adam Bird. Folks, you're going to want to grab a drink, sit down, and get comfortable because you're going to want to listen to this one. I'm excited about the guest that I have on today. My guest today is a veteran. He's a former CIA case officer with roughly over two decades of experience in and expertise in counterterrorism. He's operated in the shadows all over the world. He's an expert in his craft, and he has testified before Congress and has shared his expertise with over 10,000 professionals from the CIA, FBI, military, and police officers. He was directly with an Arabian ruler, if I'm not mistaken. We'll get into this, but he was serving as an advisor to the Afghan national police officers during his 18-month stint in Kabul. And during his time there, he authored a book called The Hidden, which we're going to get a little bit more information on that as well. So without further ado, Brian Fairchild. Brian, welcome to the show, sir.
Adam, thank you so much. It's great to meet you, and thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. You, sir, have quite the extensive background, and I absolutely love it. We've spent a few minutes offline chit-chat, and I said, listen, we got to start recording this because this is too great. So
you talk all day. Like,
right? Tell the listeners just a little bit more about yourself.
All right. Well, I normally start off with an origin story because it's really kind of a cool thing. And I like the fact that I would like, if I have an opportunity, I would like to inspire, kids, right? Yeah. Because that's how it all happened for me. And that story goes like this. When I was 13 years old, I lived in Mesa, Arizona. Don't know if you've ever been in Mesa, Arizona, but it's hot. I mean, 100 degrees, 110 degrees.
I lived in Avondale on the West Valley.
Okay, there you go. So, 100 degrees in the shade. It's desert. Saguaro cacti everywhere. So, I'm a kid. I'm going to school, and I decided I'm going to read a book. I think I read it for school, or maybe I got it out of the library. I don't know, but it was Jack London's The Call of the Wild. And I tell you, Adam, I mean, when you're a kid in the desert, looking out your window at saguaro cactus, cacti and scorpions running around, and you read about, Alaska and pine trees and sled dogs and snow. I mean, they had snow. What does snow look like? Right away, my imagination was captured, and I just realized I wanted that. I wanted that life of adventure. I wanted to go out there somewhere. I wasn't going to stay here and with the saguaro. I had to go out there. So that's the first thing that got me started. And I wanted to say that because, man, kids today should read more, because if you read books, you can go anywhere, right? When you're reading that book, you can be on Mars or Venus or World War I. You could be in, the seaside, with a girl. I mean, you could be anywhere. That book transports you wherever you, want it to take you. Yeah. So that's what it did for me. Well, a year later, we moved to Boulder, Colorado. Perfect. Lived on the front range of the Rocky Mountains. There were pine trees, there was snow, there was all that kind of stuff. So I was, I saw my very first snowfall in Boulder, Colorado, and I was just gobsmacked by the whole thing. I mean, it would just be coming down, but it was silent and, and all that. So when I was in Boulder, I went to the movie theater once by myself, and I watched the very first James Bond movie, which was From Russia with Love, with Sean Connery playing, James Bond. And everything about the movie, Adam, just captured my imagination. It was filmed in Istanbul. There were foreign languages being spoken. There were great outfits. There were KGB guys running all around and sounding like, KGB guys. And Bond and his Turkish liaison guy would go beneath the city into these caverns and catacombs. And they had like a submarine periscope that would come up into the Soviet embassy, and they would spy on the Soviets and that sort of thing. And so I saw that and I said, that's what I want to do. I got to do that stuff, And so I immediately got out of the movie theater and beelined it down to the Boulder Public Library. And because I can't just, once I get interested in something, I can't just sit there and wait for somebody to tell me about it. I mean, I got to go find out.
Right.
So I went down there and I talked to the librarian. I said, "Excuse me, ma'am, I just saw this movie and I'd really like to find out about this. Can you help me?" And she helped me. We got stuff laid out on tables at them, newspapers and Newsweek articles and books and that sort of thing. But no matter how hard we looked, we couldn't find anything for 14-year-old spy wannabes. So, I was really kind of disappointed by the whole thing. And in these adult books, like Ross and Wise, CIA, and, these books that are like this thick and written from an academic standpoint, I was looking through the pages, looking in the references and so trying to find something that looked like James Bond in those books, and I couldn't.
Right.
So I decided, well, I got to find out. So what's the next step? Well, I'll write to CIA. So I I went home and I was taking typing at Centennial Junior High School in Boulder, Colorado, and we had a format book, for letters and things like that. So I had the format book home, and so I just took out some lined notebook paper, got a pencil, and in pencil, in capital block letters, I wrote, "Dear CIA, my name is Brian Fairchild. I'm a 14-year-old student at Centennial Junior High School, and I would like to be a spy. Can you tell me how I should do that? Yours sincerely, Brian Fairchild." Well, lo and behold, I mean, I don't know if I expected to get a letter or not, but I forgot about it after about a week. But it was an important thing because, and this is another thing that I want to get across to kids: take the shot. You can think of all these great things. Oh, I want to be a doctor. I should go down and talk to a doctor. Oh no, I don't want to bother him. Take the shot.
Yes.
If you take the shot, then at least you have a chance. If you don't take the shot, you don't have any chance. So I took the shot. So I scratched the itch and I felt better about it. But one day I come home and on my pillow, my mom had gotten a letter and propped it up on my pillow, and I come in and it's a government envelope. Up in the left-hand corner, it's in color. It's when government used to use the color stuff. It's a Central Intelligence Agency, post office box, whatever, Washington, D.C. And it's addressed to Mr. Fairchild, my address. And I'm thinking, oh, man, I'm in trouble now. Because the only Mr. Fairchild I had ever known was my father.
Right.
Right? So, I mean, so they're writing to my dad. And they're going to say, Miss Fairchild, we really think it's great. Your son's, a nice guy and he wants a job with us at some point. But, take him aside. Tell him to forget about this stuff. We're a busy group and we can't be getting, block letter, pencil, things, help us out here, will you? So I figured that's what was going on. But I open it at him and I find a 2-page typed plan for me to become a CIA officer.
No kidding.
And so that's a cool thing right there. But the best thing was that it was written by a case officer by the name of Michael Todorovich. Now, just remember, I saw From Russia with Love.
Yeah.
Right? And there's Russian guys and KGB guys, Mikhail this, Mikhail that. And here I'm looking at this letter, Mikhail Todorovich. And I'm like, how cool is that? That's got to be the best name in the whole world, I can't be a spy, Fairchild, Brian Fairchild. Doesn't sound right. Bond, yeah, that sounds right like that. Or Todorovich, Mikhail Todorovich. Okay, there's a spy name. Brian Fairchild doesn't work very well. So anyway, I read it, and man, I tell you, the guy, he started out, remember where I was in life at the time.
Right.
So this guy decided on his own, it wasn't an agency program or anything. He was touched by this letter printed in pencil, and he was just going to give me his best advice. What a great guy.
That's cool.
So he says, Brian, stay in junior high school. That'd be good to do. And go on to high school and learn as much as you can in high school and have a great time. High school can be one of the most fun experiences in your life. If you go to college, I would recommend that you take international relations or international politics or area studies. And he says, and you kind of need a foreign language. We're the CIA, we work overseas. And so, find a language that you like and get into a foreign language. And the military would be great too if you can get into the military before you apply, for the agency. But when you're ready to accept, 6 months out, when you're ready to accept employment with CIA, contact us again. We'll bring you in. We'll give you a polygraph. We'll do some interviews, and we'll get you on board. And I was like, man, I just got an offer from CIA. I'm 14 years old. I got it made, man. I got it made. So I would sleep with that damn letter under my pillow, but I mean, the fact that Michael Todorovich, wrote a letter to me after that thing I wrote him, and to speak to me as an adult and to give me adult advice as to what I needed to do, which was exactly what I was looking for. That's why I ran down to the Boulder Public Library,
Yeah.
So, I mean, what a great guy. And it wasn't even a fake name. In fact, when I got into the agency, at one point I was doing an interim assignment with the Taiwan desk, and I was telling this story to people. And the guy that was my boss on that desk, he said, Mike, I know Mike Todorovich. Yeah, he's a great guy. He was out in Denver for a while. Great case officer, really great guy, So he was a real guy. It wasn't just a made up name that some clerk, took.
Right.
Michael Todorovich was a real case officer, and he had the grace to answer a 14-year-old, baby-like message, and to give me that advice. And for the rest of my life, Adam, I called that the Todorovich plan. And I basically followed it whenever I got to a point where I had to make a decision. I mean, like all of us, my life went up and down. I wasn't sure every single day I was going to go into the CIA, but whenever I got those opportunities to get out of high school or to get into college or to decide on the military, I took Todorovich's advice. And so, the point of the whole thing is that when I applied to the agency, and the agency is very selective. I mean, it's like SEAL Team 6 or
Delta,
SEAL Team 6 or Delta.
Yeah.
When you're talking about the military or finding an equal. So I mean, it's that kind of level. You're competing with guys that have PhDs and all kinds of things. But I had something that none of those guys had. I had the Todorovich plan, and it carried the day. I mean, they looked at that, at 25, and I had gone into the 19th Special Forces Group, so I had that too, right? So at 25 years old, I went into the agency and said, okay, Todorovich's plan. I was a Green Beret, I had dual major, international relations and Asian studies. I got Chinese because I was an exchange student in Taiwan for a year, and there you go. I'd like to join. And they said, come on in.
You had an entire plan written out for you, and that's such a cool story to have. Is like you have somebody, you write a letter, like you said take the shot. You took the shot,
right?
And somebody who didn't have to. Somebody saw this letter from a 14-year-old boy and says, "Oh, I'm gonna respond to this," and give him a blueprint.
Yeah.
And if like looking at your career, the Todorovich, did I say that right? I hope I said that. That plan. That's such a cool story.
And what a cool guy, I mean, of all the guys that letter might have landed on, somebody's desk.
Right.
I was in Boulder, Colorado, and I looked in the yellow pages. Back then you had yellow pages.
Right.
We didn't have computers and iPhones, stuff like that. So I looked in the yellow pages under the federal government and said Central Intelligence Agency, and I gave a post office box in Denver. And so, when I wrote the letter, I addressed it according to the yellow pages, got a stamp from my mom. I'm a 14-year-old. Okay, Mom, can I have a stamp? I got a stamp from my mom, put it on a letter and mailed it. And Michael Todorovich happened to be, sitting on the desk in Denver, Colorado when that letter came in. And for whatever reason, that he had within him, he said, this is cool. This is okay. I'm going to write back to this kid.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell him what he needs to do. I mean, I've been trying to pay that forward ever since then, and that's why I said when we started out this, I said, I want to get to kids. So if any kids are listening to this, take the shot.
Yeah.
Write to the CIA, go see a doctor, whatever you're interested in. Don't just sit back and go, well, yeah, they probably just think I was silly. It doesn't matter. Take the shot. You never know where it's going to take.
Well, the worst thing they're going to do is say no, right?
Yeah, or you never hear from them.
Or you never hear, right?
Yeah. So, I mean,
golly, that's such an inspirational. That's so cool. I love hearing stories like that. People, because it's just like, man, the world really is full of good people.
Yeah, yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah, and it's good that we tell their stories.
Exactly.
You know, and we try to pay it forward like they did. You know, otherwise we'd all be a bunch of curmudgeons and never get anything done. You know.
Brian, you talked about 19th group. I heard you say it, and I'm familiar a little bit with them. And in my days in the military, 19th group was in Camp Williams, Utah, just south of Salt Lake there. And I did my NCO school. It was PLDC back in my day. There. Now you were telling me offline that's you were with the group in Colorado.
The Air National Guard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's still there's still
a section
detachment there.
Yeah.
I mean it's headquartered now in the Salt Lake City area.
Yeah.
But it extends to
they got
5 states. I think there's Colorado, Washington,
Virginia
State.
Is another.
Yeah. It's scattered around. But when I got into it, I was in Boulder, and I saw that they were just creating it in Buckley Air National Guard Base. When I was a high school student, remembered Michael Todorovich. And all my friends were getting out. In fact, we were going around and we were taking the test to get into the Navy and the Coast Guard and stuff like that. And I just sort of diverted and I walked out to Buckley Air National Guard Base, which was out in the middle of nowhere at that point. I took a bus from Boulder to Denver, and then found out where Buckley Air National Guard Base is and walked to it, and took the test and stuff there, and they did what they needed to do and said, okay, welcome aboard. And then then I went on the basic and AIT in Fort Ord, California, which was really cool because it was right on Monterey Bay. And then I went to Fort Benning for jump school and Fort Bragg for Special Forces qualification, phase 1 and phase 2. So that's how that all worked out. But yeah, the 19th Special Forces group, and like I said, this is my commemoration to the 19th group here. I mean, I thought if I was wearing my beret, it would look a little too much. So, so I figured I'd just wear the cap.
Now, and you said you had a foreign language too. Was it Chinese?
Yeah, Mandarin Chinese. When I was,
because there's different dialect, if I'm not mistaken.
Pardon me?
There's different dialect of Chinese, if I'm not mistaken.
But Mandarin is the basic basic language of all Chinese. But you have Cantonese and Shanghaiese and Hainanese, and all those really are, sadly speaking, are dying languages. And the language that is cohesive for the whole country is Mandarin.
Okay.
So, and there are 1.4 billion Chinese. So if you get Mandarin Chinese, you can speak to a whole lot of people. So when I was in college, I got into college at California State at Chico, and I took Chinese course there, and then it turned out that because I was motivated and I was really focused on it, and I was into kung fu and all that stuff at the time, and on the weekends I'd drive down to San Francisco's Chinatown and go to kung fu movies and go to dojos and watch them work out and all that kind of stuff. So when I got the opportunity to take Chinese, that was great. So then I'd go down to San Francisco and I'd try my Chinese out down in San Francisco. And then my Chinese instructor, my professor, he came up to me one day and he said, hey, you're the best student I have. And we've got this opening for an exchange student. Would you like to be an exchange student to Taiwan? And I jumped at that. I took the shot, again.
Yeah.
And so did that, and had basically finished my Asian studies major when I came back, and I had a year to go, so I took on the second major in international relations, and finished that. So that was just right along Michael Todorovich's plan, man.
Now, so for the timeline purposes for this show, we talked high school, we talked military. Was the military and college same time? So was it the guard time, or did you do college first and then military, or was it simultaneous?
When I got out of high school, I graduated in 69, went into special forces in 70.
Gotcha.
Then I was in the unit, for years until then I transferred and went to San Francisco. Gotcha. And I transferred out of the 19th and into a 81 millimeter mortar company up by college. But see, here's the great thing, Adam, and you know how this stuff works out. So I'm sitting up there, and you've got your uniform, right? I mean, you got your patches and stuff. I mean, just because you go to a different unit, you don't take it off. You don't stop wearing the beret. So I'm in this unit, and then these guys come by to do our summer camp evaluations.
Right.
And this one guy, they come out from the Presidio in San Francisco, and one guy is wearing a beret. He's a green beret. So some guys came over to me and they said, "Hey, Fairchild, Caviani over here, he's he was Fifth Special Forces, and you're the only guy here that he can really relate to. Would you mind being his liaison to the company and stuff like that for the 2 weeks that he's here?" And yeah, great. So I'd sit there and I'd talk with the guy, and he'd tell me all about his experiences in Vietnam and all this sort of thing. And come to find out, he was just the nicest guy. He's about my size. He wore a little bracelet that a Vietnamese kid, gave him, and we talked about that. And I mean, we could get into big long stories about this because he sort of went off the deep end for a while. But when he came back for the graduation ceremony, all of a sudden, all of us found out he was a Medal of Honor winner. And so, because he wasn't wearing it with his fatigues,
right.
But when he wore the dress uniform, he came and I mean, I was just, whoa. And he had told me these stories, right? And, you never know when you're talking to somebody,
right.
How much they're embellishing or anything. But I'm at the university at the time. And after I knew that, and he was a Medal of Honor winner, I zoomed over to the university library and went to presidential documents, which are pretty cool. They're all red-bound books. And I found his citation, and his citation was exactly how he had told me the story had happened. So I confirmed that he was the real deal and he was not embellishing, and he really did get and he was just like John Wayne. I mean, at one point he stood up with an M60 machine gun and drew fire to himself so that the rest of the guys could escape and get down to an LZ and get out.
Wow.
But I mean, so that's what you take that step, and one step after another, and you meet this guy and you meet that guy, and you write to a guy, and Michael Todorovich comes back, and I mean, you just never know where your journey's going to go.
Just to be a fly on the wall for a day, walk. I just like to walk in Brian's shoes for a day, just to see what that was. I tell you what, man, it's such.
But,
and I know
I don't feel like that about myself.
Right, of course not. You're very humble.
I mean, and when you're in it, when you're in special forces or you're in the agency, well, everybody around you is the same, right?
Right.
I mean, it's not like, well, there are, some guys that are like walk down the hall at CIA headquarters and people like, that's him.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have some legends, and stuff like that. But I mean, for the most part, you're just with your normal colleagues. They've all done similar things. They've all been spies, and they've all been in the military or in combat or whatever. So you don't really think about it, in that sense when you're in it. Well,
let's fast forward here a little bit. Joining the agency, getting into the agency. You're in the agency now. Can you discuss what you did in the CIA?
Yeah, well, let me do it this way. Let me describe, because most people don't have any idea of what a spy is, right? But you've seen a lot of media stuff. Well, so we were set up, CIA was set up to go after the Soviet Union. There was no CIA before 1947. Mm-hmm. So in the war years, World War II, there was the Office of Strategic Services,
right,
OSS, and a lot of guys, from OSS eventually went to CIA when it was created in 47. But OSS itself was disbanded. I mean, it was this great, effective organization. It was a legendary organization. It did great things. You would think that, after the war, the Army would want to maintain some kind of a level of expertise like existed in OSS.
Right.
But they didn't, so after 45, they said, way to go, guys. You did a great job. We don't need you anymore.
Right.
And then 2 years went by, and then, all the policymakers started going, the Soviets are going to get the bomb, and we've got the bomb. They're going to get the bomb, and we better do something. They're all over the world. They're starting to take over the world. They're joining with China. And, oh, man, so they created CIA to counter the Soviet Union. Now, for almost all of the CIA's history, from 1947 until 1991, when the Soviet Union went belly up, the CIA was full of spies. And a spy, as defined like this: a spy at that time, an intelligence officer, a case officer, operations officer, whatever you want to call them, at that time, what you did is you went overseas, you lived overseas, you spoke foreign languages, you understand foreign countries, you understood the religions and the cultures and the history of the countries you were in, and you went to these, you went to these outposts, these embassies, wherever, because almost all of it was official cover in an embassy. So you go to these places and you're covered as a first secretary, second secretary, third secretary in diplomatic ranks, and you're supposed to run around and penetrate those governments and recruit spies in those governments to tell you the secrets of those governments and any other government. So like maybe you're going after the local government, but you have cases against the Chinese and you have cases against the Soviets, and you're trying to penetrate the KGB and the Ministry of State Security and that sort of thing. So that's what you do. And to do that, it's basically, you're not like in the teams. You're not like SEAL Team 6 or Delta. It's not a physical thing. It's basically an intellectual thing. Like a great spy or a guy that I might recruit when I'm overseas might be a deaf guy, right? And he's shunned in his own country. They think he's diseased or they think he's retarded or something. He's just deaf.
Right.
He's a great, but you put him on a corner to watch a place and to jot down truck numbers or something like that. And that guy will do a better job and is better for the job than any special operator from any, special operations team. Right. So it's that kind of a mindset. It's you need to get secrets, but how are you going to get those secrets? Well, a lot of people, they watch TV and they see, well, there's, Brian Fairchild, embassy spy, Ivan Ivanovich, KGB spy, and they meet at bars and stuff. And sooner or later, Brian's going to try to recruit this guy. But what you don't think about is, probably the best guy to recruit in the whole embassy is not that KGB guy,
right,
but the radio operator, right? Because a radio operator sees all traffic,
right,
from the ambassador on down, including the KGB and stuff. So if you could get the KGB radio operator, you'd be like a pig in poop, man. I mean, that would be the perfect thing. So the deal is you need somebody with access to secret information,
right.
And if you find that, then you develop a relationship, and you go down the line, you try to figure the person out. And at some point, when you think you figured out a way to pitch that person, to spring a recruitment approach on him, you might, you come at it from his point of view and you say, hey, Ivan, your boss is having an affair with your wife, and, your babies need that new pair of shoes, and you haven't got the Levi's that you wanted to get while you were here, whatever it's going to be.
Right.
Maybe I can help, or I've got a friend of mine that can help, and your expertise would really be, appreciated too, that kind of thing. So that's what espionage is all about.
So
when you
that
move aside from
relationship,
that, now there's a paramilitary case officer. The paramilitary case officers we've always had them,
right.
We had them from the crossover from OSS. In the director of operations, there was always a special activities division and a special operations group within the special activities division. And those guys were the guys who were the Vietnam vets and who were still doing, operations that were paramilitary, going after arms traffickers or going to the Golden Triangle or, that kind of deal. But the paramilitary operations officer that you see in the movies now, that came after 2001. And they're just like you see in the movies. I mean, you've got your weapon, you've got your goggles, you're coming in on a helo, you're going to go after that one terrorist or that one cell, and you run the operation, capture or kill, boom, you're out of there, successful mission, and you just keep repeating that over and over and over. So you can see there are two different things,
right.
They're completely separate. I mean, there's the paramilitary guys doing paramilitary operations against paramilitary targets, and then you've got spies who can do those kind of operations against anybody, right? I mean, you could be going after economic targets, political targets, diplomatic targets, intelligence targets, whatever targets you have. And you might be an overweight guy, you might be a guy that looks like me, you might have a speech defect. Doesn't matter as long as you can get access to that information and recruit sources, and get that secret information back to your policymakers so that they can make policy. So that's sort of the basic makeup of the CIA. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. My next question is, since there's basically, I'm hearing like there's two arms. You got the paramilitary guys that are out there operating, and then you have the spies that are out there with the everyday civilians, if you will. Correct? How often do they cross paths? And because sometimes you see that there's if somebody's running an op. The paramilitary people are running an op, and is it common for them to potentially cross paths with the spy that are in the field? Do they know that they're in the field, or do they keep that cover?
Yeah, well, here's the deal on that, and I can say for almost my whole time in the agency, I never did a joint operation with any of the special activities guys. I knew some guys there, and we would talk and we would joke about stuff down in the cafeteria, but I never ran a joint operation with them. But what happened, and it's even worse, what happened was that the spies dominated CIA from the time it was created in 1947 to 1991. And then in 1991, the reason for CIA's existence, the Soviet Union, went belly up.
Right. So then what?
Well, yeah. So then all the spies don't have a mission anymore, and the CIA starts downsizing, and they start closing stations and closing bases and bringing people home and getting early outs and all this sort of thing. And then that wasn't happening quickly enough for them, so they started offering early out bonuses and basically saying, "We don't want you anymore. We'll give you money, leave." I mean, you guys did a great job. You won the Cold War, man. That's fantastic. But we just don't have a mission anymore, and we don't need to have guys all over the world because the Soviet Union is no longer in existence. So we don't need to be countering them at every spot. So go home. So like I was in Tokyo Station, and and any case officer worth his salt never wanted to go home. Never wanted to go to headquarters and walk the halls of headquarters. I mean, that's what I've just been saying. I mean, what's your job as a case officer?
Right.
To be overseas and recruiting spies and penetrating governments and running surveillance operations on guys and stuff like that. So that's what you wanted to do. So when it came time for me to leave, I would say and I knew this was going on and that they were just trying to get rid of people. I would write into headquarters and say, tell me where nobody else wants to go, but you still want to fill the slot. Georgetown, Guyana, I don't care. Tell me where nobody wants to go. Send me there. I'll go there. And they'd say, nah, no, Brian, come on back to headquarters. And I'd wait a little while and I'd hear, news on the rumor mill. And I'd say, hey, well, I'd like to put in for, Portugal. I hear you need some stuff that's going on in Portugal. And they'd say, no, Brian, come back to headquarters. We don't really need to go there. Finally, I wrote back and I said, well, look, okay, I realize I'm going to have to come back to some capacity. Send me to the farm. I'll teach other guys how to do this stuff at the farm. They finally just said, look, let us offer you this money and leave. Basically, they said, we'll offer you an early out bonus. If you want, you can take you can take your money that you paid into retirement with that bonus. You'll have a whole lot of money. You can start another whole life. That's probably what you should do. And, after fighting it for as much as I could, I just finally said, okay, great. Give me the bonus. That's what I'll do. But so from 1991 to 2001, CIA didn't have a mission, and it was rudderless. I mean, it was like your primary mission was always the Soviet Union. Maybe you had, one of several primaries, like you'd have Russia, China, North Korea, or something like that. But,
right.
You always had priorities. But now there wasn't any primary mission. There was no one thing that CIA was set up to do. And in fact, there were congressmen at the time, and one of the famous congressmen at the time was Daniel Patrick Moynihan. And Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was this really famous, flamboyant sort of a guy, came to this guy here. This is Jim Woolsey, who was director at that time. and came up to Jim and said, Jim, hey, how you doing, Jim? You did a great job. Way to go. You beat the Soviets, beat the Cold War. You did a great job. Do we even need a CIA anymore? Do we need you guys anymore? So I mean, it was that kind of a thing. And so, so CIA didn't have a mission. They're, closing down things left and right. And the politicians say, we want the peace dividend, right? All that money that's been going into countering the Soviet Union, man, those politicians could use that in their constituencies. You can bet that, so it's like, give me the money, see you guys later, that kind of thing. So they all started doing that, and CIA was rudderless for 10 years until September 11th, 2001, when Al Qaeda hit. Boom! All of a sudden, the CIA had a primary mission again, and it was counterterrorism. But we're a strategic intelligence agency. We're supposed to be the premier strategic civilian intelligence agency in the U.S. government. And so when we were after the Soviet Union, we were strategic. We were global. We had to understand the Soviet Union. We had to understand the countries that they were trying to get close to. Why would they want to have this relationship with the Soviets? All this strategic stuff, right? Not tactical, going after that one guy, that one cell. I mean, this was what's going on in the world, kind of strategic.
Right.
But now it's nothing but this, Adam. It's just nothing but that. It's counterterrorism, Al Qaeda, counterterrorism. That's all we're going to do. That's really what we're going to do. And like, for any organization, institutions have to have certain things. You have to have a budget, right? You have to have personnel and so forth. So right. What was CIA situation? Well, it got a budget for counterterrorism. It recruited people for counterterrorism. No more guys like Brian Fairchild writing block letters to Mike Todorovich. Now they're going after the teams. And they didn't even create their own cool special operations group. What they did is they went directly to SEAL Team 6 and Delta and the SEAL teams and the Special Forces groups and 75th Ranger Regiment and Marine Recon. And they took people right out of those teams that were getting ready to either re-up or retire, get out. And they said, how would you like to be CIA officer? So they took those guys and they pulled them right over. They sprinkled holy water on them and said, you're CIA, you're CIA, you're CIA. And that's how that all happened. So we had a world-class special operations paramilitary capability because we had the best in the world that came from the teams. But now there's no more espionage stuff going on. There's no more that side of the house, right? And that has major ramifications for the United States position in the world, as we'll get into. But anyway, so CIA focuses on that, that counterterrorism thing as basically an exclusive deal, but it doesn't focus on it in a strategic way. Right. Okay. And what I mean is that Islamist terrorism, was spreading around the world. Islamist terrorism is an ideology. The backbone of Islamist terrorism is the Muslim Brotherhood. I mean, you can go into, a whole lot of, things into this. But if you're going after it strategically, to try to stem terrorism, well, going after individuals tactically that might be ready to blow up a bus or blow up a shopping center or something, you can kill those guys or capture them all day long, and the thing still remains, right? Because it's an ideology. You have a whole slew of people who ideologically agree with them. There are supporters, there are soldiers, there are leaders, that sort of thing. So strategically, you would have to go after it on an ideological basis. You'd have to deal with your Muslim counterparts, say, look, I'm sure you guys agree with us, we know that all Muslims aren't bad. We know that all Muslims aren't jihadis, but we got to get rid of these jihadi guys. So help us, help us discredit their ideology and their, leadership and the people that they look up to, and bin Laden and the Muslim Brotherhood and all this. But we didn't. We just went after the tactical targets.
Let me ask. Hold on. Let me interrupt you here, Brian, real quick, because sure. You're bringing something up now. If that's the case, why do we put, you're talking like this, like we got blinders on. Why are we putting the blinders on in that situation? Why aren't we? I mean, it sounds, what you're saying sounds great. Let's get with the Muslim. I got friends who are Muslim. I grew up going to church. Love these people to death. Great people. But then our let's be honest, our mainstream media here in the United States will tell you, well, that person's Muslim, they're a jihadist, they're far, left, and you're a far right or whatever. Those are the only two things. And we know that, the nice thing about America is we're a melting pot, and there's a lot. You can sit down with somebody that doesn't have the same political views as you, but when you sit down and talk to them, you find out that there's really not a lot of difference between the two of you. But it seems like, mainstream media, now social media will tend to have people believe one thing or the other. And what you're saying is the CIA, that we've put our blinders on and this is what we're focusing on. Why don't they take the blinders off and do what is there? Now, I'm going to sound a little bit of a conspiracy theorist here, Brian, but if we solve problems, there's not a war to fight. Somebody's not getting paid. Is that an honest thing?
No. I mean, here's what it really came down to is, so the CIA was, George Tenet was the director at the time.
Okay. And
George Tenet said at that particular point in time, CIA was basically in Chapter 11 bankruptcy. I mean, we had, so few resources. The farm had fallen in disrepair. Few people were trying to come and apply to the agency. This was that 10 years,
right?
And it's, rudderless boat. And when he got a chance to go after counterterrorism, then he grabbed it, right? But we were going after the guys that just blew up the Trade Center, right? So right there, you got a paramilitary thing,
right?
We had already gone to Afghanistan and Iraq, and we were doing that, that sort of stuff. So I'm not quite yet, but we would eventually get into Afghanistan, almost immediately after this transformation, and then 3 years later we went into Iraq. But we're doing all this combat stuff, right? And the military knows combat stuff. And since we brought the guys over from the teams, they know combat stuff. So you go with your strengths. Now I am, in part of your introduction, you said I taught over 10,000 people, blah, blah, blah. And I was teaching Islamist ideology, Muslim Brotherhood stuff. I'm an expert on that stuff. And but the government, didn't want to go there. And there were several other reasons they didn't want to go there. All those stations and bases that we had around the world to counter the Soviets now became liaison stations and bases to local Muslim governments, right? So let's say you're in Jordan. In Jordan, you used to have a CIA station, and we're running operations against the Soviets and the Chinese, maybe some of the Jordanians, so other Middle Eastern countries here and there. But that was basically a spy center. Now it's all a liaison center. And so you say, okay, you're chief of station now, take this information over to the Jordanian service and see if they can help us find Abdul Abdallah, whatever.
Right.
And so the whole thing turns on a military, paramilitary pivot. And it's not, and then you get the different leadership in. So, for basically a decade, I had left the agency and I was teaching at CIA and FBI and military and police officers all around the world. Me and my partner, Vaughn Forrest, my counterterrorism partner, and we're, running around and we're doing the ink blot thing, and we're making networks among these police organizations and getting these guys together and solving actual cases and things. But the government wasn't there. The government was into, let's get Predator drones up. The government was into, let's get missions. Let's go try to capture this guy, and let's certainly kill these guys because we get information, that they're looking to do an attack in the United States. So it's all that kind of stuff. And and they just didn't want to be bothered, I guess, with going to Muslim allies and having theological conversations about Islam, when they were already on the road to, we're doing great. We're taking out the bad guys. And so, that was one of the aspects. Then Obama came around. So, so for the decade after 9/11, I'm out there teaching all these guys. Vaughn and I are out there teaching all these guys. But then Obama comes along, and, it was under the Obama's watch that he said, no longer can the government string the words Islam and terrorism or Muslim and terrorism together. That's unacceptable. We're not going to do that. So all of my money, all the money that funded my training for all these organizations, the cops and the agency and the bureau and all those guys, came from the Department of Homeland Security. So when Obama put out that decree, well, the Department of Homeland Security just stopped funding all those programs. So the cops that I was training, Vaughn and I were training, they would come to us and say, "Man, you guys have the absolute best training that we've ever gotten. I mean, this is great stuff." And we had 5-day operator courses. We put on 5-day operator courses. We'd put it on in Las Vegas so that people from all over the country would come to Las Vegas, and we'd have a packed house. We'd have guys from Delta and SEAL teams and all, and cops and the FBI and CIA in the audience, and we would teach these guys about what's really going on. And here's how you go after these organizations. You can go after the ideology. And so we were doing that until Obama said that, and then these guys said we can't do your training anymore because we don't just get money for you guys from DHS. We have 15 programs from DHS that we're running, and they'll cut our funding for all of this stuff. So we're just gonna have to let you go. So that's how that happened.
What for the listeners? Yeah, like I'm sitting here, just like there's so many ways I could go with this right now, and it's you would think with the training. I want to back up for a second, because I want clarity on something here, Brian. You talk about a decade of where the CIA was just kind of treading water, if you will. And the CIA you mentioned was formed to keep dibs on what Russia was doing and whatnot. But at that time, during this, we'll just say the down phase of that decade, China was doing stuff, North Korea was doing stuff. There was stuff going on in Africa. So why? And maybe there was. I don't know. But you would think that they would just do a transitional shift and change the operations to focus on more so of those other. North Korea was another one. I didn't mention that one. But you would think they would mention like China. You would think China and North Korea would be the two biggest ones where we definitely need to keep tabs on. And I'd go as far as to say even during that time frame, China likes to play chess. They're not playing checkers. Let's be honest. There was a book, 100-Year Marathon, and I think we're kind of in the middle, just over the middle of that right now. And you look at that and how strategically they have been doing things for the last, 2-3 decades. Why didn't we focus on China and pay more attention to what they were doing?
It's the perfect question, and it's exactly where we need to go in this conversation. And the answer is that in that 10-year down period, remember, politicians didn't think we needed a CIA. They actually thought there was an end to history, right? And that phrase was used. There's an end to history. The United States is the unipolar power in the world. There's nobody else that's around that's even coming close to us. We're never going to have any wars or anything again because we're the big deal now, and we'll make sure that the world is taken care of, and we don't have to worry about that stuff.
Right.
And so they didn't go to Jim Woolsey and say, "Hey, I was kidding. We really do need you guys, and we're going to give you some money so you can keep tracks on possible threats to the republic." Which you're absolutely right. That's exactly what we should have done. There should always be a level of special foreign intelligence looking for threats to the republic. That should always be the case.
Right.
But it wasn't. In fact, George Tenet was probably, if you asked him, he was happy as hell that he could even get some funding to keep the agency going. And then once we realized, when I say we, and once the agency realized that the whole paramilitary thing was a gold mine, then they really focused on that. So you go 20 years down the line where the United States government has no strategic concept of the world anymore. All they know is counterterrorism, right? And for 20 years, all the case officers that are in CIA are now paramilitary case officers. They've all been promoted as paramilitary officers. None of them, or very few of them, you still had a few out there doing China operations and stuff because all institutions are smart enough to say, hey, yeah, we're really focused on our primary mission, but we still need several $1 million to do our China stuff and several more $1 million to do some Middle Eastern stuff. They're always going to do that
Right.
just to keep stuff going and getting more money. And even if they don't use the money for those operations, they can move it over to counterterrorism. But they're going to say that, right? So we completely lost track of the world. And like you say, once we did that, the world sort of grew up around us,
Yeah.
and took advantage of our myopic vision. And perfect example of that is the South China Sea. Now I got out in '95 out of Tokyo Station, but I've never ceased being an intelligence officer. I figure once you're an intelligence officer, if you join for that reason, I mean, remember I was 14 saying I wanted to be a spy, so
right.
That was my motivation, and I've kept that up for the rest of my life. And I do research on all these countries like every single day, and that's why I wrote the book. And we can talk about that, a little later too. So in 2013-14, China starts building their man-made islands in the South China Sea. So guys like me that were once in, now out, we're writing papers and sending them, the CIA and whoever we could send them to, saying, hey, this is a problem, guys. I mean, China's building man-made islands in the South China Sea, and it's building up its military. And they're not building those islands to have beaches. I mean, this is a serious thing, and nobody wanted to listen. In 2015, Obama had a meeting with Xi Jinping and said, my guys, I hate to bring this up, but my guys, they say that you're building these man-made islands and that could be a threat to us. And, let's talk about it. And Xi Jinping looked in his eyes and he said, I promise you we will not militarize those islands, until 6 months later when he started militarizing the islands.
Right.
So now that's 2014, 2015. Now 2018, in just 3 years. Now think about this, Adam. I mean, if we were on the ball, and remember we've got a freedom of navigation patrols going through there, going right by those islands, watching them being made and stuff, and yet we don't do anything. And then Admiral Davidson, who was then made the head of Indo-Pacific Command, goes to Congress for his hearings. And in his hearings in 2018, they just started back in 2014, only 4 years later, he's before Congress and he says, for all intents and purposes, other than going to war with the United States, China controls everything in the South China Sea.
Yep.
Now, what an indictment that is.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a big statement to make.
It's like this didn't just happen overnight. Now China has strategically changed the balance of power in Asia because they control the South China Sea. And it just continued going like that. I mean, so, all the stuff that you hear about China. Now, China has the largest navy in the world. China has the largest military in the world. China has the largest and most diverse rocket force in the world. China has the largest Coast Guard in the world, and the largest maritime militia, and the largest fisheries, and the largest shipbuilding capability. All of that, is a strategic threat to the United States. And for that whole 20-year period that we were focused on counterterrorism, we didn't do jack about that, right? And so then it's not until 2018, Trump comes to power, and Mattis comes to work, for him, and they got some pretty good military guys there, and they put the national defense strategy out.
Yeah.
And it's in 2018 where they say finally in the national defense strategy, terrorism is no longer the primary concern for the United States government. Now it's nation to nation, peer to peer threats between the United States and China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. And so that's at least on paper.
Right.
But nothing really happened for another 2 years or so. And once you put it, the ship of state is just like that, ship of the CIA that's derelict. The ship of state just doesn't go turn like that.
Right.
You get the idea out there. Yeah. Things are changing, and the ship of state starts,
Well, here's the thing.
And after 10 years or so, the ship of state, gets to a point like this, and you start actually doing something. But, it was 2018 when they finally said, this is how it is. And we're still just trying to respond to that now.
Why is it taking so long for us to respond?
Well, there's still people who don't believe China's a threat. And you don't have to look any further than a week or two ago when Xi Jinping came to San Francisco, right? And we've been begging the Chinese for, just let us get together, let's have a meeting. We haven't been doing any policy, and in fact, I can make a pretty good argument that Biden has basically ceded the South China Sea to the Chinese. But the point that I was going to make was that a whole bunch of Fortune 500 guys met with Xi Jinping in San Francisco after we had our official talks with Biden and stuff, and these guys were giving Xi Jinping, who was a human rights a terrible guy in human rights,
right,
practicing genocide against the Uyghur race, and any other religion in China, and anybody who just doesn't agree with Chinese Communist Party beliefs, and they gave him a standing ovation, right? So you can't say that there's a big consensus in the United States that China is the enemy and we've got to do something about it. And Biden has been doing everything he can to appease the Chinese ever since he got into power. He has repeatedly said, I don't want confrontation. I don't want war. Yeah, I don't want Cold War.
Come on.
I just want us to be competitors.
Brian,
and they're eating that up with a big spoon at them, and they're taking advantage of us every single day.
Oh my God, Brian, it's like, let me. Maybe I should ask. Maybe this is the question I should ask. Does China run the world?
Well, it's getting to where it runs the world. I mean, if you look at, here's even the worst part, Adam, and it just goes on from here. And this, and the thing that I like about just saying this stuff is it's apparently obvious that the points I'm making are true.
Right.
But you might have heard people in government, recently saying things like, well, China and Russia, and increasingly Iran, or increasingly North Korea, depending on who's talking, are like getting together, and that could be a complication for us. But the fact of the matter is, there's a new axis of evil.
Yep.
Right, and the new axis of evil is an anti-American military bloc led by China.
Right. And
I wrote this paper back more than a year ago, and I sent it to everybody I could think of. And it was actually called The New Axis of Evil, the anti-American military bloc led by China. And I make the case, over a year ago that, China, Russia, Iran, have been doing joint military, patrols, naval patrols, air patrols. Of course, the Chinese and the Russians are together. They're doing all kinds of patrols, even up in the Aleutian Islands, North Korea, Iran are supplying, Russia with weapons for the war down in Ukraine, and what they do as the new axis of evil, they're bonded, and they all share the same ideology, which is let's unseat the United States from being the world leader so that we can take over.
Right.
And they say this, right? They actually say it.
Yeah.
So it's not like Brian Fairchild's making this up. I mean, they actually say this. And so, yet we Biden at least treats the world scene today as though North Korea and Iran and Russia and China are separate problems. And that when we regard China, we've got 10 years to catch up with them. That's what he says, in his formal policy documents. But they're not separate problems. They're a bonded anti-American alliance, which are doing things against us every single day, right? And they create crises on their timelines, at their behest, that will deplete our resources and send our resources to the four winds.
Right.
And one of the best examples right now is what's going on in the Middle East with Iran and the Israel war in Gaza. No sooner had that started that, the Iranian leadership and Hamas leadership went to Russia and had a big meeting.
Yeah.
It was a done deal. My belief is that the new axis of evil wanting to separate American capabilities and resources, you know, had Hamas attack Israel on October 7th, knowing that we would have to respond and that we would use up a whole lot of our precious resources and get really involved in a situation that's really difficult, and they could bring the whole world against the United States because Israel's pounding, Palestinians, and they know how that always works out. So that's what's actually going on. There's a new alliance, and and unless the United States government addresses that alliance as a anti-American bloc working against us every day, rather than separate problems that we might be able to work on separately, we're going to just keep going down and down and down.
Right. And my gut wants to say follow the money, because you look at, I'm not going to say who, but you look at certain.
Well, yeah, I know exactly where you're going.
Political leaders.
Yeah.
In our government, you look, and if you follow their money, you'll see where their ties are. Now, and listen, don't take my word for it. Look this up yourself. Everybody, 99% of this country carries around these little pocket computers called cell phones now. Look it up. You're sitting there flipping through crap, wasting half your day anyway. Look some of this stuff up and educate yourself.
Yeah, education is something that's not a real
popular thing. I know. I'm probably going out on a limb saying that.
But there's obviously a reason for this.
Right.
But even without knowing full well what that reason is, there's a reality.
Right.
And the reality is that this is what's going on in the world. And it doesn't matter what Biden says or any politician says. This is what's going on in the world. And, look at what happens. If, all of a sudden, the new axis of evil will get together and say, well, hey, let's cause some problems for America up around North Korea. So North Korea will lob missiles over Japan, and they'll threaten this and threaten that and say maybe they're going to have the next nuclear test. And we send assets up there. We send 2 battle carrier groups and we'll quell things down, And then stuff happens over in the Middle East, and we've got like 58 vessels over there now, and a Marine Expeditionary Force, and all this kind of stuff. Taking our resources yet again and putting them somewhere, and then we're trying like hell to try to figure out where we're going to get the ammunition and the 155 millimeter shells to give Ukraine, because we're running out of stuff, and we've taken it out of our own ammo dumps and given it to them. Now we don't have enough if we get into war, and then what happens, Adam? If when all this is going on and they've separated our resources and our attention and our intelligence concepts and our assumptions about the world, and they walk on Taiwan.
Well, I think that's the plan. I think that's been the plan.
There's no strategic concept in the United States anymore.
I think that's been the plan for the last 6-7 years, is they want to take over Taiwan.
So what I say, about strategy, and people say, well, what can we do about this? Don't be so pessimist. Well, you got to be pessimistic. But there are things that you can do. And one thing is that the United States has to have a plan, a strategic plan for the world. See, we don't understand ourselves, and the policymakers that sit in Washington today, they don't have any idea of really what our vital national interests are in the world.
Right.
I mean, people will say, obviously Europe's important. And well, what about Europe's important? And what about Europe's important that requires the United States to intervene with how much money? See, that's when you start to talk strategy, when you start answering these questions, right? And if you go after if China goes after Taiwan right now, well, first, is the United States going to respond? And if it does, how is it going to respond? And where are you going to bring those assets to go to Taiwan? Are you going to take them out of the Middle East? And if you're going to take them out of the Middle East and you didn't need them there to begin with, well, why do you have them there?
Right.
See, these sorts of things. And then from what budget are you going to take things to go after Taiwan? And how far are we going to go? And, we can't really get close to Taiwan because China has so many missiles. And here's a fact that probably most of your audience doesn't know. In 2021, the U.S. Army wrote a report. They said the People's Liberation Army Rocket Force is the most diverse, expert rocket force in the world. Then they took just anti-ship missiles out of that group, and they said China has so many anti-ship missiles that they can hit every U.S. combatant in the South China Sea, to the extent that every combatant in the South China Sea, American combatant in the South China Sea, has used its entire missile defense capabilities and still have more to pound them with. See, that's a scary thing. And when you're talking about hypersonic missiles, before our battle carrier groups can even get to the point where they can, be close enough to launch attacks,
they're getting hit.
China can launch its hypersonics against us and sink our carrier groups. And they can hit Guam and they can hit Okinawa with them. And Mark Milley, who just recently left as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, has said almost verbatim, we can't counter that capability. The United States has no way of countering, hypersonic missiles. And so, so we're in a world of hurt. But my point basically goes back to things that you were saying. Why didn't we do this? We should have, right? But we didn't. And obviously, China didn't just snap its fingers and get, the biggest, the biggest, the biggest, the biggest, the best, the best, the best, the best, the more, the more, the more. It happened over decades, and we sat around watching China get to be the most powerful, country, certainly within Asia,
right,
and a powerful country that can now start to threaten the United States in the Pacific and other places, and we didn't do a thing, And so, that's why I say, we have not had any strategic concepts in the United States government or any of the intelligence services for well over 20 years.
You think?
And one of the main reasons was because for that 20 years, we were doing nothing but counterterrorism. And you got to pay the price. That's the price we pay.
Brian, I want to change gears here. And I'm definitely going to have you back on the show because there's just so much.
There's
more
a lot there, isn't there? I mean, there's
a lot we can cover there. But I want to make sure that we hit on this before we wrap up. You wrote a book called The Hidden.
Right.
Why that title and what is it about?
Okay, well, perfect that you brought that up because this is the perfect time in our conversation to talk about it. I wrote the book because I was pissed off at CIA, right? And let me just say, and all your viewers and listeners, know that as a CIA officer, I have to submit the book to CIA before it can be published, and I've submitted it, and basically in 2 weeks they okayed it, and it's been out and it's been for sale now for a while. But I wrote it because I was pissed off about CIA, and the reason I'm pissed off about CIA is they're starting to get back into the spy game, we talked about initially.
Right.
The spies, not the paramilitary guys, but the spies. Spying on Russia and spying on China and North Korea and Iran and the rest of the world, and trying to figure out what the strategic situation of the United States government is. But they're screwing up because they're still hiring people, putting them on a conveyor belt, putting them in a cookie cutter approach, of training. It's just like if you go into a Fortune 500 company, you start at the bottom. Maybe you start at the mailroom or whatever, and you learn what that Fortune 500 company is about, and who the leaders are, and how you write for that company, and how you do your accounting for that company. Well, the same thing with a CIA officer. You come in, they get all these, write your applications and send them in to us, and we'll look at all these applications, decide who we want, choose you, bring you, put you on a conveyor belt. Train you up. At some point, we'll send you to the farm. You can get trained up down there, and then we'll send you overseas. And we'll send you overseas in an embassy position, or maybe we'll be sneaky and we'll put a couple people in Fortune 500 companies over here in these foreign capitals. But see, you can't do that anymore because the surveillance technology is so absolutely fantastic these days that once you stuck a flag in the sand and you call it a U.S. embassy, and you say, all our spies are here, you've just given away the game.
Right.
Now, earlier on in the Cold War, in the past Cold War, that wasn't so bad because we owned a lot of the counterintelligence services that we were working with, right? We would go to these small companies in Asia and Latin America and Europe, and they were devastated by the war and stuff, and we would build their counterintelligence services and say, let's jointly work against those bad Soviets. So those guys were working with us. But in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, all of a sudden politics started to change and countries started to say, well, we don't like American policy in our country anymore. And all of a sudden, those counterintelligence services were no longer owned by us, but now becoming competitors to us. So you really had to have the ability not to be caught as a spy.
Right.
So your listeners might say, why? Well, here's the reason. if they know Brian Fairchild is an official cover guy and he's a spy, and they follow me around and they see that I go meet somebody from their Ministry of Economy, let's say, and I'm thinking this guy's a target, and down the line I'm going to recruit him. We've got a good rapport going. I'm getting to be good friends with him and learning about him and his access and stuff. But one night, the counterintelligence service goes over and knocks on that guy's door. And he answers, and they say, "Oh, hi, we're from the, your National Intelligence Service, and could we come in and talk?" He says, "Sure." Comes in, they say, "Hey, you know that Brian Fairchild guy, don't you?" He says, "Oh, yes, sir, I do. Oh, yeah, he's a good guy. Yeah, I like him. American Embassy guy." He said, "Yeah, but he's a spy, right?" Everything changed.
Yeah.
Right. But all of a sudden, that guy knows he can disappear tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
He might never come out of a prison. He might be shot in the back of the head. I mean, it's a bad thing all around. And all of a sudden, his eyes get this big, and he's like, "Oh," And the guy said, calm down." And the ministry guy says, "Well, I will stop seeing him right away." And they say, "No, no, don't be silly. We don't want you to stop seeing him. We want you to continue to see him. And at some point, he's going to try to recruit you as a spy. And when he does, we want you to accept. And when you accept, we're going to provide you with the intelligence to give him, for him to give back to his headquarters, and for his headquarters to give to the policymakers. Yeah. And it's all going to be erroneous. Yeah. It's all going to be fake intelligence. And they're going to make their intelligence based on bad assumptions and bad intelligence.
Right. So
that becomes a double agent. That's what's called a double agent. See, so you got to have cover, because if you don't have cover, you can't have secret operations. And CIA has just run into all kinds of trouble with that. Back in 2010, its entire China network was wrapped up by the Chinese, the entire China network. And then 2 years ago, their counterintelligence center came out and sent a cable to worldwide stations and bases, meaning it went to everybody in the field. And they said, "Man, oh man, for the last year or so, we've been having dozens and dozens of guys that you, Brian Fairchild, recruited and run as spies over in these foreign countries. All you guys out there, your assets are being wrapped up. They're being shot. They're being imprisoned. They're being turned into double agents. What the hell are you guys doing? We don't believe that that you're doing your job. You're recruiting people too fast. You're not doing counterintelligence. You're not doing good enough tradecraft. You're letting people follow you, so forth and so on." Well, the reason for that is this, I believe, the CIA started looking right away, do we have a mole? But no, it's just a lousy way they operate. And, you can't stick a flag in the sand anymore and say, here we are, and expect those guys to remain secret and not compromise. So, let me give you just an example of one kind of technology. You've heard about CCTV and all that kind of stuff, and it's just everywhere, right? Yep. In fact, the CIA itself said 30 countries can surveil our officers overseas without ever putting a real live person against them through technology, right? But now let me tell you about this one technology that will just blow your mind, and it's called WAMI. And WAMI is wide area motion imagery. And WAMI is a small package that you can have on a Cessna aircraft, you can have on a large drone, you can have on a satellite, you can have a whole lot of different ways. It's not a huge thing. It's not a room size thing. And you can have it on a private Cessna. And you circle the city. Say you're circling Washington, D.C., and it continually circles, and a cone of digital photography goes down and basically covers that whole city. So as you fly around the city, that cone is constantly recording all movement in the city.
Right.
All the time. All movement in the city all the time. And as long as you have that digital record, you can not only watch what Brian Fairchild is doing now in real time, but if once you figured out Brian Fairchild is a spy, you can go back for 6 months, a year, however long you've got it stored, and find out every route he's ever taken from his house, who he's met, what businesses he's gone to, what people he's met, what restaurants he goes to, what things he does on the weekends. You can get all of that. So how in the hell can you have an official cover guy stick a flag in the sand, put your people there, and expect them to get away with secret operations? You can't. Okay, this cues up the book again. The title of my book is called The Hidden, and that title refers to remaining hidden below China's surveillance capability. And you can't do it like I've just said, CIA does it, right? You can't do it that way. So you have to have a radically new way of doing it. Now, I told you earlier that I've been both non-official cover and official cover.
Yep.
Non-official cover is best because you don't have anything to do with the embassy, or you're not supposed to, or any military installations or any U.S. government connections at all. You're supposed to be out there in the middle of the population. Nobody's supposed to figure you out. So right now, CIA, and another thing I've got to say is in 1975, our people, our military, the Pentagon, made statements about the capabilities of our satellites. In 1975, they said our satellites were so good they could take pictures of license plates, from however far up in the sky they were.
Yeah.
Well, it's 40 years later. Do you think China's got that capability now? Irrespective of whammy and all that sort of thing, they've got one of the most active space programs and satellite, recording surveillance programs in the world. So if you bring people into CIA headquarters, you got their license plates. Nobody can be undercover anymore when you go to a known location. Now, have you ever been around CIA headquarters, Adam? Have you ever been back in Northern Virginia or whatever?
I've been around it. I haven't been on it or anything like that, obviously, but
okay.
I've been
Well,
in the areas.
there's two. It's bordered by two main arteries.
Right.
Route 123
Yep.
that goes, right up to Tyson's Corner, shopping centers and stuff, and the George Washington Parkway.
Yep.
And in between those two main arteries is CIA headquarters. Yep. It's a forested area, but it's not out in the middle of nowhere. It's right in the middle of a residential area. You just go down a couple of blocks and you're in McLean and Langley and that sort of thing. So CIA has, when you're coming eastbound on 123, there's a 3 turn lanes you get into to turn into CIA headquarters with a big sign saying CIA right here. Well, if you use no cool technology at all, but if you just had 15 guys, and I just use the word, 15 just for the hell of it, 15, 20, 100, 2, whatever, and you just had 15 guys coming, eastward down Route 123, and 15 guys going northward on 123, especially at the end of the day, and passengers are just taking down license plate numbers of cars that are coming out of CIA. You got so many of them right there, right?
Right.
And that's not even using a hidden license plate reader or anything that you could just have on the bottom of your bumper and soak up everything about all those vehicles going in and out. So you don't need high technology to figure out that people work at CIA. So you can't do that anymore. That's my point.
Yeah.
So how do you do it? How do you get new recruits, and how do you have a new kind of a clandestine service?
Yeah.
Well, you got to do it sort of like the way sports talent scouts get their talent, right? The NFL comes to them, and there's no headquarters. There's no one place where they're going to bring all these people to and say, oh, show us your talent. They get a guy like you or me, and they say, hey, Adam, ball better than I'm ever going to know ball.
Right.
I want to hire you, go to, junior high school football games and high school and, junior college and find me talent. And I'm looking I need a guard. I need a tight end. I need a quarterback. Whatever. And you go out and you watch these people. Right. And you go out and you find talent, and you hear rumors that there's going to be a Sandlot ball game over here, and you go over there and you find, sooner or later you go, holy crap, look at the way that kid hits. Man, what an arm on this guy. That guard, you can't even get through that guard. And you start building a list, right? Yeah. And you say, hey, so what if you did the same thing? And instead of bringing 20 somethings to CIA, putting them on the conveyor belt and the cookie cutter thing, and start building up their knowledge of the organization like, you would in the Fortune 500 company, and learning how the mail works and stuff. Why not go have a special cadre that has nothing to do with CIA, nothing to do with intelligence? I mean, you really got to think this through. But you get these talent scouts, and they go to foreign countries, and they look at the American business community, right? And there's always stuff going on in the American business community. You have the chambers of commerce, right. You have 4th of July, all this sort of thing. There's plenty of times where you can get in and you can talk to people and find out about other people. And people say, man, that George over there, here we are in the deepest, darkest Africa, and that guy can get contracts like nobody's business. He's got contacts with the tribes. He's got contacts with the government. Man, that guy knows what he's doing. And you find people like that. And then you do the big search thing that we can do now with AI, and you know everything about everybody's life almost instantly.
Right.
And you find out that old George over there was in the 82nd Airborne back when, and he did 2 tours in Afghanistan. He's got a bronze star with a V device for valor. And you find out everything that I can find out about this guy indicates that he's a loyal American, and he's just doing his best to be a businessman and make a life for his family.
Right.
In fact, he's married to a local. And in fact, the local he's married to has a cousin in the government, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you wait for old George to come back to, Virginia or wherever his home base is for a vacation, and you approach him and you say, "Hey, George, my name is such and such. I represent an intelligence organization here in the United States, and I've got a proposition for you. Would you like to make a contribution for your country?" And you take it from there, right? And all of a sudden, you go from, recruiting a cadre of kids that don't know anything and probably won't know anything for 7 to 10 years of assignments. And you've been taking them and you've been throwing them against the wall like spaghetti, seeing if something's going to stick, hoping that because they're trying, some of them will make a success out of something. And you go from that to recruiting guys who already have networks, friends, relationships, understanding of the politics, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And you only need a few of those guys. So you need a lot of the young 20-somethings because only some of those guys are going to succeed. So as you're throwing the spaghetti against the wall, you got to have enough spaghetti to throw against the wall. But if you're being selective, like you're looking at SEAL Team 6, who's going to be our next SEAL Team 6 guy, or who are we going to let in the Delta, or who are we going to let in the teams and the Special Forces groups and the rest, and you recruit that way, quality, not quantity, you only need a few guys in a few key locations, and you've got your cadre right there. So that's the kind of thing that we need to do now, and CIA is not doing it. And CIA would basically have to say to the policymakers and the American public, we're obsolete. The way we're doing this stuff, isn't going to work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. And in fact, look at all the problems we've had in the recent past of getting wrapped up and, our sources killed and in prison. I mean, it's obviously not working. We got to do something else. But we can't do it for you because everybody knows us, so somebody else has to do that. And that's why I wrote the book, and that's why it's called The Hidden.
Where can people find it?
Oh, you can go to brianfairchildbooks.com. You can go to freehiddenchapters.com, and it'll take you to my website. It'll take you right to the chapters, and you can read the summary, the prologue, and the first 2 chapters absolutely free. And the first 2 chapters cover a lot about what you and I have just been talking about, Adam, about how one thing that will wake people up is how, you and I talking in American politics, whether you like Trump or you don't like Trump or Biden or whatever, that's 2 Americans talking. We can do that sort of thing. We can call each other names. But when you read about how an enemy thinks about you, that all of a sudden perks you up. Oh, bastards. That's what they think about us. But then when you look at it, you figure, oh, yeah, they're right.
They're not far off, unfortunately.
Yeah. And you see that, and the United States of America now, I mean, there's so much dysfunction and division and polarization between us that we've basically we've removed the united word from United States of America.
Yeah.
There is no United States of America now. There's a dysfunctional States of America or polarized States of America, but you don't have a United States of America. And China's taking advantage of that, So anyway, that's why I wrote the book, and that's why it's called The Hidden. And I hope that if your folks go and look at it, they'll enjoy it. And
we're gonna have links to your website and where they can get the book and read the chapters in the show notes.
Fantastic.
But below here, folks. So, God, Brian, I'm on time. I have to go, unfortunately. But we're gonna have you back on because there's so much more I think we can cover. But I got one more question for you.
Sure.
You're on a show called The Decision Hour, and we make decisions every single day. Name a time in your life where your feet were on the line and you had to make that decision. What was it, and what was the atmosphere like?
Well, actually, there are several, and certain ones come to mind, and one of them is a little funny. I was in Afghanistan, and I was living in a place called Green Village. I lived outside of the Green Zone and worked outside of the Green Zone with Afghan intelligence officers. But I lived in this place called Green Village, and it was like 6 o'clock in the morning, and I just gotten out of the shower and I'm naked, and all of a sudden, boom! The bad guys blew up the main gate, and the blast, the blast, knocked me back a little bit, but I'm naked, right? And all of a sudden you hear, so not only did they blow the gate, but the compound is being infiltrated. And so, I mean, it's kind of funny. It's like, well, I could like stay naked and go hide in the shower, or well, I guess I'll throw on my pants and I'll try to get into my boots and throw this shirt on, and I get my M1 and down the stairs I go, and then there was a little defensive position down the stairs, and my Afghan Afghan assistant, an American Afghan assistant who was my interpreter and stuff, he goes and peels off to one of them, and I go and peel off the other, and we're ready to go, but it's like, boom, I'm naked. What the hell? What I do know? So it's not all this really, you see in the movies, you're going down the patrol and bing, 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 okay, red one doesn't go over, not that, boom, oh fuck, what do I do now? Oh shit, where's my pants? And then
that's the thing. Like, God, I really don't. I know I came into this world this way, but this isn't that I was expecting to leave.
Yeah, I might very well leave like this. And then there's another one I can remember is airborne. The first jump, and nothing can prepare you for that first jump. I mean, you jump out of mock towers and stuff like that, but the next thing you know, you're up in a C-130, and you're going to go out the door, and they say stand in the door, and you stand in the door, and you're looking at everything down below, and you're going, hey, this doesn't look like those mock towers.
Yeah.
I mean, I got jump out in the nothingness here.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothingness there. And if they keep you there for a while, because the pilot's got to go around, to come around again because the air's been kind of bumpy or something, then all of a sudden, you can go from bad to worse if you start turning around. I didn't do that, but I saw a guy who did that, and the jump master just grabbed a hold of the cable, hoisted his feet up, and kicked that guy out the door. The guy, whoa! Because you just can't, you can't hesitate in the door. You can't have a whole plane of guys panicking, so there was that kind of thing. And, when we get back together, we can tell some funny stories. Let me tell this one funny story.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
So it's jump school. The first jump goes perfect. And you're down, and it's a beautiful day, man, and you're going, I was worried about this.
Yeah.
This is great. Look at this. Oh, wow. I want to do this every day in my life. So the second jump, and nobody ate breakfast the first jump, because you don't know, right? You don't know how it's going to affect you. You don't want to be getting ill or anything. So the second jump, I eat 2 breakfasts, and I'm ready to go. And I'm like, man, this is going to be great. I can't wait to get out the door. And you got your steel pot at the time, and you're humming to yourself, and then the guy gets up, and he comes up with a bullhorn, and he says, okay, all you guys, you probably recognize that we've been circling the drop zone for a while. I hadn't realized that. Yeah. And then he said, and you probably realize that we're kind of going through a storm, and it's been a little bumpy, and I hadn't realized that either. So he says, so if any of you guys are feeling a little seasick, we got these bags up here, and I'll tell you, Adam, it's the strength of the suggestion.
Yeah.
As soon as he says that, I go, oh my God. But peer group pressure keeps it in, right? Because I'm on the inside.
Don't be that one. Don't be that guy.
And I'm way in the back. So there's guys on the fuselage here. There's guys where I am, guys behind me, and guys in the next fuselage. So I turn to Bob Weaver and I say, hey, Bob, get me one of those bags. And he's like, oh, okay, Brian. Yeah, and he gets the bag. So now I've got the bag. And the bag is, once you got it, it's like, I might as well use it.
Right.
And I tried to keep it down, but it wasn't going to work. And we hit another bump, and it's like, that kind of thing. And so now I've got this bag, and it's like one of those donut bags that you turn and you have the clips.
Yeah.
So I'm now holding the bag, and I look at Bob. He says, take it with you. So I put it behind my quick release,
Oh, geez.
and I just can't wait to get out the door.
Okay.
And finally they open the door, and I just run out the door. Get me out of here. And again, a beautiful day, and everything's okay. And I'm like, and then I hear clink, and my body goes like that. And I go, what the hell was that? And I look down, and two of the straps, you're only held into your chute by two straps, and one of them is dangling between my legs. Obviously I had lubricated it, when I barfed.
Yeah.
And then I put the damn thing underneath the thing, and when we went out the door, I smashed that and took it everywhere. So I just grabbed a hold of my, my shoulder harness, and they got the black hats down there going, "Hey, you, turn into the wind. Turn into the wind." And I'm like, "I can't, Sergeant. I can't." So the whole way down, there's no way I was going to let go of that shoulder harness. And I just, boom, I creamed into the drop zone. And the black hat came running. "What the hell are you? I told you to turn into the wind." And I pointed to the strap dangling between my legs, and he goes, "Well, damn." And that was it. He walked off, but I mean, so the first jump, going out into nothingness and then being naked when we came under fire, those are two things I remember. I had to make a decision, what am I going to do?
Those are great stories. Brian, I listen, man, I really appreciate it, sir. I've had an absolute, just a fantastic time with you today, and I can't thank you enough. Thank you for your service to our country. Thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for continuing to educate people on what is going on in the world and why we need to pay attention to what's going on. So,
my pleasure, Adam. My pleasure. And let's get together again, and we can talk even, not on your program.
Absolutely.
Talk you and I.
And we most certainly will. Folks,
all right, sir.
That is all the time that we have. Brian, thank you again. I'm going to have Brian's contact information where you can get his book and his website in the show notes below. Before we let you go, make sure you check out our parent company, Heroes Media Group. Simply go to heroesmediagroup.com. Check out all the great shows and articles that are going up there. Until next time, you've been listening to The Decision Hour.